With that, let me introduce David Turch. I first met David in, what, 6 or 7 years, I think now. When I worked for the city of Imperial as their city manager, Imperial had engaged with David Turch and his firm several years prior to my getting there and had been representing them in Washington, D.C. And so during the 3 years that I served as their city manager, I had the opportunity to work with David and his team. I found that they were incredibly successful and very, very good at what they do. Little Imperial, if you don't know anything about Imperial, sits down on the southern border of California, halfway between Tucson, Arizona, and San Diego, California. It's an agricultural area, a little bit isolated from the rest of California, a very large Hispanic population down on the border with Mexico, very blue collar, and it's my guess that there are a lot of our California representatives that probably wouldn't even know where Imperial was, or they've heard about it, but they don't know much about that. David and his team were very good about making sure that they knew about Imperial and the things that Imperial was doing, and very good at engaging with our representatives, our congressmen there, and our senators, and ensuring that funding opportunities and earmarks or whatever else were available to us, and that we could capture some of those opportunities for the projects that we had going on there. So without any further ado, I suppose I'll turn the time over to David, and he can introduce himself, tell you a little bit about his background, I'm sure, and I'm confident you'll enjoy this. David, it's all yours. And you can stand, you can sit, you can go to the podium, however you want to do this. It's all yours. You have until about 1:30 this afternoon. So
he said that only because I'm from Washington and you've heard of filibuster. Oh, but I'll ruin someone's, I'm technologically disadvantaged, so we're going to move this one that's right. And you see we've dropped something up. Mayor, members of the council, delighted to be here. I'm David Turch. With me is Elaine Temple, so member of the company. You know, as soon as I get up, I'm reminded of the admonition about how the brain is this wonderful thing. And it starts working the moment you're born. And it doesn't stop working until you get up to talk in public. Stay with me. We're a more than 3 decades old company. We have a building directly on Capitol Hill. It used to matter more than it does now. Every once in a while, however, when you really have to get across the street on 1 block from the U.S. Senate in the historic area, and when you have to be there right now, we don't have to take a cab, we don't have to do anything. Now with emails, that's less important than it was 10 or 20 years ago, but we're still directly located on Capitol Hill. Our client base goes from Japan to the EU, across the U.S. from Oregon to Florida. Those things matter to you because decisions that are made for this city, you would think, are made with your senators and your local congressmen and whatever, but so often they're made with people who are really in power in the individual committees. And those people are from Montana and Minnesota, Michigan, Maine, Maryland, and Mississippi, all over the U.S., but they're people that we know. And that matters in being able to achieve the things that you need to have happen. We have, I think, unique accomplishments in America. MSAs, the medical savings accounts that allow you to put money aside as almost a kind of a retirement account and use it for medical purposes, but allow it to build up, was one of our projects with the Golden Rule Company out of Indianapolis, Indiana, maybe 20 years ago already. I remember that well. We've accomplished things that had never been done in America before. quickly, I'm thinking, in the only time in America the Congress has ordered the FAA to close an airport was one of our clients here in California. In fact, I'll try to be more brief, but fill you in with a couple of stories with me, just kind of fill you into how the firm operates. When we started, we only represented private sector clients. And I was dragged kicking and screaming really into representing public sector, and it was the city of Rialto. And I knew the mayor well, and they had a problem with their airport. They said, well, will you help me? And I hold a commercial pilot's license, so I know I own airplanes, so I know some things about aviation. And I said, well, this is how you take care of that. That's not what I do X, Y, and Z. Well, that didn't work. Well, yeah, you didn't follow my directions. Here's plan B. We got up to plan D or E or something, and I finally said, okay, I'll take care of it. Flew out, visited with the West Sector people in Hawthorne, and basically they said, stuff it, because we're not doing whatever it was, and I can't even remember what Rialto wanted. And I said, I don't like that answer. What I do remember is they said, Turch, if you don't like it, why don't you see what you can do about it? Back then, the Congress would designate airports that were critical to the nation's airport and airways system. That year, they designated 26. And these are airports like JFK, Hartsfield in Atlanta, Miami, Chicago, O'Hara in Chicago. In California, they designated 2, LAX and Rialto. So before San Francisco got any money, the little airport in Rialto got the money. Now let's fast forward a couple of decades. And Rialto really didn't need the airport anymore. We were right next to the former Norton Air Force Base, which we also handled. It was one of the first RAC processes, the transition from military bases to civilian use. Rialto Airport and now the San Bernardino International Airport Authority, which is still a client of ours, right next to each other. Doesn't make any sense. We're plowing tens of millions of dollars into this facility and tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars into this facility, and they're like 10 miles apart. You can't even operate an airplane in 10 miles. End of the story is the only time in the history of America the Congress has essentially ordered the FAA to close an airport was Rialto, California. We couldn't exactly close it, which will give you another idea of how we work, because it's difficult to just say we're closing down an airport. So what we did under the law is we said the designation of Rialto Airport by latitude and longitude and whatever in its parameters is hereby replaced over the top of San Bernardino, and that's how we changed the law. We've done other things in the eras when earmarks were not permitted. Again, to use California examples, we had separated the city of Palmdale Airport out of LAWA, Los Angeles World Airports. There were 4. And immediately I got a call from Ontario, hey, we saw what you did at Palmdale, we're also a client, we want out. It took us 2.5, maybe 3 years, but in the end of the story, when we finally got the agreement of how we're separating what is now the Ontario International Airport out of Los Angeles World Airports, it involved a transfer of up to $240 million between the airport authorities, and that transfer was specifically forbidden by federal statute. We had to change the statute. But you see, we had to change the statute under a rule in which that specificity, that's okay if it's the White House, tell them I'll call it. Specifically, so, but the very definition of an earmark is specific locality and money. And that's exactly what this was. It was an earmark when earmarks were prohibited. I had to twice go to the parliamentarian in the House and explain this wasn't really an earmark. I knew it had feathers, it had web feet, it quacked. It was a squirrel. I got away with it twice. And when we went to the Senate, because I had a controversy with a Montana client, with John Thune, who happened to be, oddly enough, in the Senate. Well, you'll get into this, because this is federal government. See, it makes no sense that the Commerce Committee would oversee the FAA. Well, it does in Washington, so that's how it is. John Thune is chair of the Commerce Committee. We have a difficulty between South Dakota and Montana with an air base. And Thune is not my friend at the moment, and I really can't have that provision for the Rialto Airport go to his committee because he's going to kill it. So the end of the story is, thanks to Senator Feinstein, we had it held at the podium in the Senate. Just unanimous consent was approved. Bingo, there we are. So, in any event, that's a little bit about how the firm works. We've been able to do things that haven't been done in the history because, in part, we're thinking a little bit. You have needs and requirements for this community, and I don't want you to think too narrowly in how they're solved. A couple of things happen. Everyone who comes to Washington has a good case, and so do you. You know, it doesn't differentiate you at all from the tens of thousands of other people who come to Washington, because everybody's got a good case. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. It's then, how do you really multiply that to be able to get what you want? And one of the ways is, don't think too narrowly. So often I talk about things that are transportation entities. Well, we have to have it out of transportation money. No, you don't. You don't care how the problem gets solved, just so it gets solved. And first of all, money's fungible. You spend money now on police. Well, you have to look up when I'm saying police. Because there could be a test at the end, see? In any event, but you spend money on city services today that are expenditures, and you're taking them out of city revenue. But what if you have a transportation project over here, and we can fund something for the police department? You're already money's fungible. You can move it around. You don't care where federal money comes from to be of assistance to you, provided the matching requirements and the paperwork are not overbearing for you. As long as you don't care if it comes out of the Navy's submarine funds. I mean, as long as it meets your goals. And we've been very good at doing that, not thinking too narrowly about how you get things accomplished. Let me talk a little bit about where the federal government is today. And the federal government, so often when I'm talking to clients and prospective clients, they're really concerned about dollars. Well, dollars matter to you, but there's another aspect to this. You're also governed by a huge overlay of federal regulation. So in the end, it's not only money that we've been able to get, it's also been regulatory relief. And we can do that a couple of ways. And one of the things I think you should be paying attention to today, and I'm not sure the press is covering this well, there's a Supreme Court case. It's Chevron versus somebody, and it involves fishing rights off the coast of New England or wherever it is. The end of that case really is, what kind of authority does the executive branch have in promulgating regulations? So if you're the EPA and the Congress didn't say whatever XYZ is in the law, can you then put out a regulation that will govern that, whatever it is, poisonous substance in your water, just as a for instance? If the court comes down and says, whoa, the Congress has to decide more of the specifics, folks, I'm going to tell you, the Congress is not equipped to do this. I mean, we set kind of like the board of directors to the executive branch. This is what we want to happen, and you're the experts. You hire all the experts. You figure it out, and then you promulgate with citizen input and whatever else we're supposed to be doing to get to the end result. So you wind up with cleaner air and cleaner water and lower tax bases and better transportation systems and all the rest of the things that you want. So I watched the case carefully. But one of the major points I want to make this morning, we have come off a couple of years of incredibly massive spending. I haven't seen anything like this in my entire life. We're not talking about a few, as we say in Washington, a few $1 billion, just rounded off to the closest billion. We're talking about $1 trillion. The American Rescue Act, a significant tax cut for Americans, lowering our revenue coming in, pumping money in like the faucets are just open. It's coming to a close, folks. One, we have run up a debt that's significant, and we should be paying attention to the debt. That's less important than the press likes you to think it is, but in any event, we've got a debt we have to be concerned about, and we are going to reduce spending substantially. Some of the provisions of those monies are going to run out anyway. Let's take the infrastructure bill. Probably the infrastructure bill is a pretty good one. First of all, the infrastructure bill was passed on a bipartisan basis. Every single piece of major federal legislation that's come out of the Congress in the last 3 years has been bipartisan without exception. So all the stuff about how we all hate each other in Washington, well, we have differences of opinion, but in the end, the mechanics of government have to work. And then we kind of figure out how we're making that work. And I'll say that one more time, because it's really important. Every major piece of federal legislation has been bipartisan, without exception. And that includes the infrastructure bill. The infrastructure bill, it boggles my mind. Now, we've been really, as a company, very involved going back to ICE-T. I remember what that acronym stands for, the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act. And we love acronyms in Washington, and I get caught up so often spewing them out. And then I can remember one time appearing before the city council in Glendale, and they asked me, what does that stand for? And I didn't know. I couldn't remember, but I knew it had to do with something, whatever it was that I was talking about. Think about this. We spend $550 billion every year for 5 years on infrastructure. And if I go back to ICE-T and Safety Lou and all the other transportation bills that we passed over the years, we used to argue that the needs of the nation would go to, like, I remember in the case of Safety Lou, we said we would want to have, could we have $380 billion over a 6-year period? And the answer was we couldn't afford it. And now we're spending $550 billion a year. It ends in 26. And that's one of the lessons I want to leave with you this morning. That huge open faucet of federal funds are stopping. And money that you've gotten in the past, pay attention to whether this is 3-year money, 5-year money, 2-year money. There's always an end to federal money. It's not that you get money and then let's say it's 3-year money. You have to either spend it or obligate it in the 3 years. And one of the most difficult tasks I am going to have is if we get funds for you and you don't either obligate it or spend it. And again, I'll use an example. Riverside Transit Agency in Southern California had, and it was like nothing money, 1.1 million or something for a transit center. I do remember the Temecula Transit Center. My mind doesn't always fail me at this. But in any event, and it was, we had told Larry a couple of times, hey, be careful, because if we think we're running up on the time for this money, and FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, I remembered another one, rescinded the money. And I called and said, well, we're really going to do, no, it's gone. I went all the way to my good friend at that time, Ray LaHood, who was Secretary of Transportation. I knew him again, client base across the US that matters to you. Ray LaHood was the congressman from Peoria, Illinois, which is how we got to know Ray when he was in the Congress, and now he's Secretary of Transportation, so he winds up still being a good friend. I can talk to Ray directly. Ray cannot reinstate that money. So we get your money, you got to obligate it or you have to spend it. And in the end, we were able to we did work a deal with Ray. I said, Ray, you've got discretionary funds, figure it out for me. So he gave $2.2 million to the Moreno Valley or Rivers, I don't know, to a different transit center, but you see, money's fungible, so RTA could then move it from, since they didn't have to spend the $2 million over here, they could put it into Temecula, and they were good. The only time I have been successful in reversing a rescission, and I hate to go back to the city, but again, it was Rialto, California, and they had something like $1 million. And it was 3-year money, and they didn't spend it. And we went back and said, well, we got this meal. See, the difficulty with the Congress is they're going to say to me, Turch, you came in here and you said your favorite client, Foster City, has had this really important need. And now they couldn't even spend the money we gave you to meet the need. It's hard for me to answer that. That year, we were able to extend Rialto's money for whatever it was, and again, it was hardly any money at all, it was $1 million or $2 million. They were one of only 13 instances in the entire nation when money was extended. So we've been spending huge amounts of money. The faucet's going to dry up. Competition's going to be much more intense than it has been in the past. When we do things for you, you have to take advantage of it. Spend it or obligate it. When I talk about that, how do you then operate a little bit more effectively? And I'm now standing behind the podium because this is kind of the bearer of bad news, and I want some protection if you're going to throw things at me. You've been in this wonderful environment. Money's been flowing out for you. You haven't had to do a whole lot to get it, and you have had some of the most powerful people to help you. One of the most liked senators, very powerful, in Dianne Feinstein. Oh, she's not here. We've had a Speaker of the House who I regarded for, if you talked to me 10 years ago, I said Nancy Pelosi was one of the most effective and powerful speakers since Sam Rayburn. Do you know my good friend John Boehner wrote a book, and the very first sentence, John regards Pelosi as the most effective speaker in the history of the United States. Guy Fye's gone, Pelosi's gone as speaker. And then we had Kevin McCarthy. I will tell you, Kevin exceeded every expectation I had for Kevin as speaker. I thought he did a terrific job given what he had to work with and the lack of experience stepping into it. You know, Pelosi's been around forever. Kevin had not been. And I thought he did a really good, well, you know what? He's not speaker either. And you have two senators. I've known Alex Padilla since he was on the city council. In fact, you do these wonderful things in California. It's one of the reasons I love you a lot. Not the only reason, but they give you these great works of art. You see them from the state senate, the state assembly. I've got them all, including Los Angeles, and mine is signed by Mayor Hahn and Alex Padilla, who happened to be president of the city council at the time. That's how long that relationship goes back. But he's fairly junior in the Senate. And your other senator is a lame duck. Now, understand that the Congress is an institution that worships at the altar of seniority. You want to acquire power in the Congress? Keep breathing. Just stay alive. That's the most essential thing you have to do. Just continue in the job, and eventually there's some trade-off to it, but for the most part, seniority matters almost more than anything else. And folks, we ain't got it anymore. We ain't got it in the Senate, and we don't have it with your House member. Doesn't mean they can't be effective for you. It's just that now we have to go back to having these people pair with people. Remember I talked about it earlier? Those people from Montana and Minnesota, Michigan, Maine, Maryland, and Mississippi. And then you put those deals together, and it's no different than the kind of work we've done in Southern California. You know, the whole thing with the Ontario airport happened because although the person who was really the head making this happen, good example, represented by a Democrat. However, chair of the committee, Don Young from Alaska, Infrastructure Committee, and the Transportation Infrastructure in the House, is a Republican. So we have Gary Miller, who's the adjoining congressman, doesn't even represent the Ontario airport, to be the head guy with all of this. But the person we use on the Infrastructure Committee has been Grace Napolitano, close friend from downtown LA. You just have to put all this stuff together. And if I haven't made the point before dramatically, I can tell you as a firm, it isn't that we're nonpartisan, but we are fiercely bipartisan. So mostly what we're doing are the city issues that we have, and for the most part, they're not cultural issues, and I can't think of, maybe except for your client. She happens to have the Orange County, California Board of Education. Let's say they're more conservative than some of our other clients. Thank you very much, as you might guess. Yeah, we kind of borderline on some cultural issues with the Orange County Board of Education. But outside of that, we deal in you know, cleaner air, better roads, better social services, all that. They're not cultural issues, and they cross party lines. We can make things happen. But you need help from some other people that are around. So how do we make that happen? I haven't heard anybody raise the issue of filibuster yet, so I'm grateful for that. We do a couple of things for you. First of all, we're really involved in the communities. Remember how I talked a little bit earlier about money being fungible? If we're not here and we don't walk the streets and we kind of get to know what the community is about it, and Stefan, you know that from Imperial, we're there a lot. Because if we don't do that, then we don't know really what you're doing. We just know you made a request for XYZ, and now we don't know how we can move money around to meet that if we can't take it out of the right spot. So we're there a lot. We like to do an annual session, which is kind of a workshop session. Hey, what are your priorities for the coming year? You're a little late in the game because this is the stuff we do back in November so we can be prepared. Let me tell you right now, we are already starting on the earmark process for the vast majority of our clients. This is intensely labor intensive. It takes huge amounts of our time. And you know what? It doesn't involve kind of any intellect at all. It's checking off boxes and then getting an email at 8 o'clock at night and checking off boxes again. And the one thing I can tell you about Washington is you can't predict anything for their deadlines. This will go back some years, but I was told that projects for the transportation bill needed to be in, they were thinking in May. And at the end of March, true story, I got a call on Thursday noon saying, we're going to close them off tomorrow afternoon at 5 o'clock. That's Washington. Sometimes takes a long time. Sometimes we can make things happen really fast. We have, the firm is large enough that we have a person who is totally devoted to research. He's analyzing every piece of money opportunities for you that come down, and you will get calls I'd say on average, not every day, but a couple times a week. City manager generally designates who should get those calls, and they're really simple. Here's a funding opportunity for, are you interested? Hey, if you're interested, you call Kevin. Kevin will say, well, here are the requirements for that, and then you say, well, I'm not really interested, or you are, and then we'll tell you how to go forward and work on that. We send out a weekly newsletter just to kind of get, more or less weekly, just to kind of keep you informed about what's happening in Washington, what the program is like. And we ask that you folks, supposedly if you're a lobbyist or an advocate in Washington, you have this secret bag of pixie dust and you walk around and you put it in the air and things happen for you. My supply of pixie dust is pretty damn small these days, so I need your help, and we ask that you make it a point to be involved in it. You have to be. People are tired of talking to me, and the differences in the meetings I have and the meetings you're having are day and night. That is, you meet with people and they're happy to see you. Hardly anyone's ever happy to see me. It's what the hell do you want again? And I have meetings that last 4 or 5 minutes, and they tend to be really technical. What part of the bill do you want it in? No, I've already got an ask in that. Okay, what if we put it in over here? How about at 10:32? Okay, yeah, I might be able to do that for you. When you come, they talk about how things are back home and the sunshine and the good weather, and then they'll walk out, and this is the kiss of death for you, because they'll tell you, I'm going to do everything I can to help you. You just lost. Well, anyway, we need you to be a participant. We ask you to come to Washington with us. We'll make all the arrangements. If you haven't been there before, we'll meet you at the airport. We'll have all the meetings arranged. These meetings work because you've identified what the need is. We'll have sent that information off to the offices, both executive branch and legislative branch, ahead of time. So you don't walk in with a surprise. They already know what you're after. This can be a meaningful exchange of where you are, and particularly with the executive branch. You get to exchange with people who make the decisions on what it is that you want. And two things. First of all, they want these programs to work. For civil servants, it becomes kind of their life's ambition. They may have been in this program all their lives. They want it to, so they want to hear from you. How could it be better? And you will influence 2 and 3 years down the road how that program changes. On the other hand, you get to learn from them what they intend to do in 2 or 3 years. So you're ahead of the game from everyone else who hasn't been there, because they don't have this information, but you do. And you just make these small adjustments, and those are the adjustments that in the end, I think, cause you to win. I've talked for a long time, so I think what I want to say is I want to thank you very much for listening to me. And I will tell you that I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and hearing none, I want to thank you again for listening.
Not so fast. Do we need to open up to public comment?
No,
Okay.
no further public comment in the Sun.
Okay, I think it'll open up to the council to see if council has any questions. Do I have any questions from? Art, why don't you go first?
Yeah. Who writes the bills? Who writes the text?
It goes to the general counsel's office in the legislative branch.
Okay, so that nobody in the staff really is, or are they involved?
No, they're intricately involved. What will happen generally is that, first of all, we're not talking about a major bill or piece of legislation here. We're generally talking about something that's very specific if we're talking about an interest that you have. If it's a general question about how bills are produced, we have an idea. In bills, as I say, we should understand a couple of things about government that are important. One is that theoretically the legislative branch has all the authority. By example, the executive branch is just there to carry out the wishes of the legislative branch. It hasn't worked that way so well in the last few years as the executive branch has become more and more prominent. But the end is, not a single dollar of your tax money can be independently expended by the executive branch without the express authorization of the Congress. That's the big thing about the appropriations bills every year. Well, the press calls them the budget, but it's really the discretionary appropriations bills. Those bills tend to be produced in the committee. And again, understand the importance of seniority and chairmanship. As I like to say, committees are absolute democracies. That is, the chairman has one vote and everybody else has one vote. And this will be a good example. It's not true at all, but it's a good example of how it works. It's like everybody else shares one vote and the chair has one vote. In the case of a tie, the chair wins. Chair has tremendous power. I mean, who is in the majority really matters. So end of the story is the chair has an idea, he wants to create a new program, she wants to create a different kind of a program. They skid, this is what we want to accomplish, and then it goes to legislative council, and they write the actual specifics of the law.
Sam?
Thank you, David. My question regarding securing funding. How much harder is it to secure funding for a smaller city of 35,000 population compared to a city with millions like Los Angeles, for example?
This sounds awfully self-serving, and it is, except it's accurate. You have somebody there and they have somebody there, and you play on an equal field. And the difference is people who don't have anyone there. And again, I will give you an example from some years ago when the city of Placerville, California came, and they were asking their congressman at the time, John Doolittle, well, what else do we have to do? And his answer was pretty straightforward. He said, no, you've already done it. You hired Turch, he's here. It isn't, the size doesn't matter so much. It isn't the efficacy of your program, because remember I said, I've never, in decades in this business, had one person who's come to me and said, you know, Turch, we got a really lousy project. This just sucks, but let's screw the federal government and get some money anyway. Everybody comes with a good story. And being there 365 days a year, walking the halls, making your presence known, puts you on an equal basis with Los Angeles. You're just there, you're just different. Your requirement is probably in the millions, and theirs could be in the billions, we don't know. But whatever it is, are they listened to any more than you? Not really. You both are able to make your case. And the fact is, America is made up, not just the big cities of 10 million people or 17 million in LA. It's made up of community. This is the essence of America. This is what America is about. You matter.
And do most of those opportunities require matching funds from the city?
Almost always. I can think of few instances where a match is not required. And in some cases, and we will help you with this, the match becomes a determining factor. That is, as they're talking about who's getting money, they're saying, well, which communities are willing to make a larger investment? So let's say the match is 10%. What city would be willing to put in 30%? You know what? This is a city that seems to be more committed to the project. It does move you up the ladder, but not in every case. Only sometimes does an increase in match matter. We can help you with that, because we'll have been through all of these cases and have 28 different examples of what worked for us and what didn't work for us.
Okay, thank you.
That may actually put us in a better spot than other cities, because we do have an ability better than a lot of other places.
John?
Just a couple, how do you arrange your clients with your staff? Is it geographic?
I understand that of 8 line employees, 5 have been with me more than 20 years. So it's really a stable organization. What this matters for you, it's kind of like having the broad-based client base, is people really understand each other and they're interchangeable. I remember someone, and this is a few years ago, but we're walking from the House to the Senate, and we had different meetings. I can't remember the conflict anymore, but what I remember is just picking up the client underneath the Capitol in the subterranean as we're walking through, and all of a sudden they turned around and said, well, where did you come from? What happened to Jamie? And I said, no, he had a different meeting. But the conversation hadn't even changed. We were just able to keep talking and going. So you would have a prime person who generally would, the way it works mostly is one of the account people will deal directly ordinarily with the city manager and city administrator. I tend to deal directly with the council. And so you see me as often as you want, but generally a couple times a year I'll be out here, whereas the account person will be out here every couple of months. That's kind of the difference. And then when you have a problem, including members of the council, you call the account person directly. And in fact, mostly it's probably a good idea, because if you want to know really the minutia of what's going on, you know, what was contained in line 27, I'm not going to know.
You said how many employees on your staff?
8.
8? And how many clients?
I'm going to make a quick guess and say 30.
David, I don't want to interrupt. Would you mind talking a little bit about some of your staff members? Jamie is somebody that I obviously work very closely with in Imperial and know, but can you kind of tell us a little bit about the staff that you have there?
Yeah, everyone with the exception of, I think Kevin Bosch has extensive Hill experience, as do we all. So we all work with members of the House and the Senate, and that's what kind of gives you the entree into the occupation. Jamie Jones came from us from 2 members in the LA delegation. He was essentially chief of staff. When the second member retired, as you will, actually I think it was fairly apparent he was not going to win the next election, and correspondingly retired graciously. In Washington, we say we need to spend more time with our family. I think that's what he needed to do. But in any event, so then Jones became an opportunity for us. And this is a guy who I think, I can tell you when I come in on Saturday or Sunday afternoon, the single person I'm most likely to see in the building is Jamie Jones. Who, and clients, there's not one client who would, you know, get rid of me in a heartbeat, but never get rid of Jones. The service is whatever you need, but I think it's a hallmark of the firm. Whatever it is you need, we're going to do it. And it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's, hey, whatever you need, 24 hours a day. We'll take the calls. May not have the answer right away. We'll get right back to you. But Jones is kind of indicative then of the staff people that are there.
I will tell you that when I was in Imperial, I spoke with Jamie probably almost every couple of weeks, once a month at worst. Whether that was just a quick phone conversation or he was coming through town, text messages, just regularly, updates on things that are going on. I don't know if that's how it is with the other clients, but certainly in Imperial, we developed a pretty close connection there as we talked about the city issues and things that were going on. So,
Yeah, you will get to know us personally, and we'll get to know you personally. The firm is large enough to really play a significant role, so we're not a 1 or 2 man shop. But you can't almost, government's become so complicated over a period of time. No, it's the standard answer that I get sometimes from in public comment, well, why do we need a lobbyist at all? We can talk to our congressman. Well, hey, if you can't, why am I talking to you? I mean, if you don't have a relationship with the people that are local to you, yeah, why don't you start there and call me in a couple of years? Or I'll give you the name of my competitor, you go talk to them. The answer is, we assume you have those kinds of things. All I can say is that government now is so complicated. You know, it used to be, you could walk into the White House at the beginning of our great nation and talk to the president. Now, you make too many telephone calls to the White House, and the Secret Service is going to talk to you. It's just far more, and it's an issue that we have. The other way I could explain it is not one of my favorite clients. Actually, they are, and they're kind of indicative. We represent Dino Nobel, the Nobel of the Peace Prize people, and have for some 25 years. They don't really, like so many of my offshore clients, they don't get the system. I mean, they do rationally, but not with their gut. So they have an assembly member, something like your congressman, who represents about 22,000 people. Well, how come we can't go in and just see this guy? He's chairman of the Armed Services Committee, and even his district is 750 or 800,000 people. I mean, you can't just walk in the office. They don't kind of get that. So in some sense, it's the personal relationship with us. You get to know people, and we get to make the connections. If that was perfectly clear, I must have misspoken.
John's smiling, so I guess it's okay.
I guess, you've mentioned several different entities that you've represented. I wasn't counting, but we were nearing the 30. You've got to have more clients than 30 clients across the entire country.
I could, and I'm including people who have been clients, like, for instance, Lake Nona Estates in Florida, for instance. It is the only aviation client that we've had where we were adverse to the airport. And they're no longer a client because basically we solved their problem. Lake Nona Estates came to us. It's a wonderful story. I'm taking up too much of your time, except this one I really like because I was perspiring blood. I get a call from Bill Nelson, who is the senior senator from Florida. I want to see you right away. No senator calls me to say, Turch, you've done such a wonderful job. You're such a great guy. I mean, that ain't why they're on the phone. I want to see you right away. And my call to the building is, who's screwing up with Bill Nelson? Who's screwing up Florida? Not me, man. Not me. Not me. We're all clean. Who's screwing up the Commerce? He's the ranking member on Commerce at the time. Who's screwing up the Commerce? Not me, man. Not me. So I go into Nelson's office, hat in hand. I mean, I know I'm going to be decapitated, and I don't have any reason why. When the senator says, I understand you've signed Lake Nona Estates. Yes. I'll live there. We're going to screw those guys. We're going to get them. What happened is the Orlando airport had been surreptitiously acquiring little plots of land on the east side of the airport. And now they were putting it all together in a jet remanufacturing plant. Now understand, this is a gated community where Lou Holtz and some other people live. I mean, we're not talking small houses here. And from here to the road, they're going to put a jet engine plant? I don't think so. So we get hired, and it's the only aviation client we've had where, in fact, we're adverse to the airport. We finally worked a deal with the airport. There's a 50-acre park immediately adjacent, and then a level 1, basically office building, and then a level 2, and the jet engine facility is going, I don't know how far away, but it, was the compromise that got worked out with Orlando. Everybody seemed to be happy. So the answer to the number of clients, yeah, we don't have people like Nona Estates. But on the other hand, if you need anything out of NASA, Ben's still a good friend.
Vice Mayor, do you have any questions?
You mentioned that we were a little bit late in the process Can you kind of talk to us about if we were to sign your firm, what happens next? How do you identify projects and maybe help?
You identify the projects. You're my boss. I mean, you give me the orders. I don't get to determine what the priorities are for this community. You do. And correspondingly, you elucidate what it is that's most important to you. We'll figure out the positions where they go, and then we'll, to both Senate offices and your House member's office, we'll explain your priorities, find out how it fits into what they're after, and then how we can make things happen, because they may already have like 5 requests in this category. Well, requests from who, and if it turns out, to be Padilla's home neighborhood in LA, you probably ain't gonna get it, just saying. So we'll figure out a different way to make that go. And I should, if I haven't said it before, I think it is one thing that I want to make clear for you. We provide access to almost anyone, and we'll provide the access to the decision makers, not some, we're at Department of Homeland Security or wherever, not somebody who's down. We'll provide access to the administrator or whoever is, it's not always the administrator, but whoever is running your program, the guy who's really key to you. We have that access. Doesn't mean you're going to win. Doesn't mean yes is some magical answer I get. I hear no a lot. Can't do that for you. And then my answer is, well, you know what? What can you do for me? I've got some other stuff I need you to do. And at that point, you kind of have them a little bit on a guilt trip. And that, I think too many people walk out and say, gee, I'm really sorry, I wish you could. No, hey, if you can't do this for me, what can you do over here? Let's walk out with a win. But I do want to say our political involvement, and we are involved politically, so we write checks to people. It's part of the American system. It's how things work. It doesn't guarantee you anything more than access. Doesn't mean you get a yes. Okay? I hear no a lot. Then I just want to hear the alternate. But I can. This will go back to Senator Feinstein a long time ago, because I get asked frequently, what does it take to be a lobbyist? The true story, this is back in the days of flip phones, and somehow I was making a personal call and I misdialed, and I dialed the senator's personal phone. And the answer was, hi David, what do you need? And when one, you have their numbers, and two, they'll take your call. That's what I'm really telling you we provide.
So what sort of, I guess, so in terms of like the nitty gritty of the process, like how do you kind of get up to speed with our city? And you mentioned there's a meeting, like, well, what do you do in terms of, how does that look?
What, one more time?
Well, I guess what I'm interested is, I think there may be things we don't even know we need, or that we could have access to.
Right.
And that, I think, is where maybe some of your expertise coming in and saying, Foster City, I have done my research, I know a little bit about your community. I think you're missing a perfect opportunity here.
On two fronts. First of all, we will do that because we'll be here enough to get to know the community and what your needs really are. Number two, we do that through a regular, and I mean really regular, I don't want to say it's daily, but I would say a couple times a week, you're going to get announcements. Here's just something we think you might be interested in. And we're not going to bore everybody with that. It'll go, usually not even the city manager wants to be bothered with this. It's an assistant or somebody who takes and says, yeah, this is something we might want to look at. And we're just sending you a very brief, hey, here's money for whatever it is. Tree eradication or something. I don't know, we have some trees we might want to get rid of. Or we're in a desert, we don't have any trees. We're not interested in that, just ignore it. We do try to focus that on more and more. It's almost like when you're shopping on the internet, algorithm that's going to get to you. Hey, you just looked at, so we'll send you more stuff in this category. You get those all the time. So two things. One, we really make an effort to learn about the community. I mean, we're going to get to know each other personally. It'll be to my advantage, it won't be to yours, I assure you that. But in any event, so two, we get to know the community, but then past that, so we'll make suggestions to you. And then you'll get a pretty steady flow of things that are available, most of which you don't want. Most of which you have no interest in, which is why we're just sending this, just a very brief, hey, here's something we found in the register this morning, here's something USDA just put out, maybe you'd be interested.
The staff will be spending time going through those things. Ideas will come up, those regular phone calls that I mentioned that I would have with Jamie. This is where it happens. Those ideas get kicked around. We bring back reports to the city council to talk about things that are happening, things that we're pursuing. Council will have obviously times when you're looking at something saying, is there any money available for something like this? And we can take that back if we haven't already thought about it. So it's, as David said, I found, at least when I was with Imperial, that it's really about building the relationship, having those regular discussions, kicking the ideas back and forth. Jamie, I talked to Jamie actually, about a year ago when I first got on board, and he had a lot of questions about the levee project. And of course, the levee project was already coming to a completion, but he had wondered, did you get any federal monies for that?
Where's our regulations?
Right, and so these were the kinds of things, he didn't come out and say, boy, you really missed the boat there. He's not like that, but, I could kind of tell in his voice as we talked that, wow, that would have been a good one to kind of jump in on. And of course, Congresswoman Spears endeavored to get some money, but it was too late by then. We'd already started the project. This project was near completion by then, right? So we've got lots of other projects out there that we're looking at. Stuff in public works with the lagoon and pumps, all sorts of things. Is there money available? Can we accomplish that? We don't know until we go through that process. And there's no promise. One of the things that when I was in Imperial, they were quick to say, don't expect results tomorrow. This sometimes is a lengthy process of getting in there. And sometimes you're looking at 2 or 3 years out. Sometimes it might be a little quicker than that, but it can be all over the place. And it depends on what's going on in the country at that time, whether earmarks are big and there's lots of money coming through, or if they're shutting it down. You just have to work with what you're in.
The answer is, that is so true. I can say that on any project down which we've started, I think I've hardly ever achieved success understanding the road down which I was traveling initially. There's always a roadblock. I'm going over here, I'm going over there. Some things that I thought would be so simple, it required a telephone call. It's taken me 2.5 years to get to the end. Other things I thought were just going to be, this is one of the most excruciating projects I've ever taken on, in a phone call, and it got solved. Washington is a funny place. It seems so huge and so complicated, but it's really small town America. People who matter in Washington, we all know each other. I mean, it's really, and we all eat the monocle, right? So, it's a small community when people exchange ideas, even with competitors, do it all the time.
Any more questions?
I have a quick question.
Now, he's the city attorney, so be careful how you answer this.
So a lot of your examples you talked about earlier, funding opportunities involve FTA, or FCC, not MTC, where there's a federal monetary component to the projects. Foster City, from my understanding, doesn't have a whole lot of federal funding, except the one-offs of, parking lots and this and that. We don't have a transportation district. We don't have a airport. do you have examples of kind of more, local projects that you've been able to help on, like a rec center or a city hall or a fire department or police department, or even a levy is a good example, where it's more state, local funding and not look at federal component?
Two things. First of all, the feds are involved in absolutely anything you might think about. There's a federal component to, and if you haven't seen it yet, we'll invent one. The answer is, I can recall, this is really early in, but I was approached, Ed was actually a client that we handled for a while. They sold fishing worms. If there's anything the feds don't buy, it's fishing lures and worms. Yes, they do. By the millions of dollars. Who would think? So the answer is, that was the example. This is 25 years ago, but after that, I thought, whatever it is, the feds are going to be involved, or we'll figure out a way to do it. But the answer to your question is, federal programs can be very specific and very narrow. That is, use a dumb example, you're going to trim a tree, but the program may be only available for eucalyptus trees that are in a boulevard that are more than 50 feet high. I mean, there are programs like that, so narrowly defined, you just have to fit into the parameter. And then there are programs, almost doesn't matter what the money's used for. Bus and bus facilities. I have put gateways into cities with millions of dollars in bus and bus facility, and I'm not even sure, the theory was that if they wanted to, a bus could go through the gateway. I guess it was close enough to justify it. So there are programs, and that one just came to mind, that are really pretty broad parameters. And you think about, we wanted a specific example. Tunnel 26 is the Metrolink tunnel. Metrolink is like your BART system, but in LA, kind of. And Tunnel 26 connects Ventura and Los Angeles County. It is more than a mile long. It has a great separation. When you're in one end, it's totally dark. You can't see the other end. This had not been rehabbed in a century. I mean, it was in very poor condition. And that was something that was so needy. I mean, we're going to be able to do this with a couple of phone calls. I think 2.5 years later, it was never successful. We couldn't get it out of any kind of railroad money. We couldn't get it out of any surface money. I remember one time trying to put it, this is a true story, trying to put it in the aviation bill. And I sat down, Marilyn Campbell, my COO, and I went over and sat down with the chairman of the Transportation Committee, and they were considering the aviation reauthorization bill. And he has his whole staff, which is like this, waiting to talk about our project. And I said, Jim, what I need is, I need this money in the aviation bill. And he said, I can't put a railroad tunnel in the aviation bill. How the hell would that look in the New York Times for me? And unfortunately, some of these guys I do know too well, and I said, Jim, that's not going to be my problem. And he looked up and said, do you have anything else you want to talk about? Was the end of the meeting. We put that tunnel rehab in the housing bill because I couldn't get it in any other way, and I found a provision that people who rode trains through the tunnel either lived in houses or they knew somebody who did, and it was close enough for this program. And I couldn't, and Fort Hueneme is out on the other end. I tried to put it in the defense bill. I couldn't get it there. I mean, that became one. It was just one of those issues that was so needy. Everybody's got to be able to see this. No. But finally, there was a provision in the housing bill that was broad enough we could do track rehabilitation in a railroad tunnel, and it was close enough. Depends on the program. Some, as I said before, some federal programs are so narrowly written, you have to comply exactly. It's got to be an Apple computer of this size, and it's got to, and that's it. Or otherwise, it just says, hey, pens will qualify, you're close enough, you know, computer, pen, anything, pencils, you can make anything go as long as it transmits information. Depends on the program. Does that answer your?
Just as muddy as.
Boy, in that case, folks, success is at hand.
You know, thank you very much for your presentation, and I applaud you. I noticed your business has been in business since 1987. I've got a couple of simple questions, maybe you can answer them. I didn't notice any testimonials on your website, and I would be more interested in the local cities that you have represented. You don't necessarily need to provide them now, and testimonial information for them. How are you paid? I'm a businessman. Do you work on a percentage? How are you paid, and how do we allocate funding for you? And that's my question.
You account for whatever it is that the contract produces. I think the agreement's pretty simple, and our contracts are very simple. It allows you to get out with 30 days notice at any time if you're not happy. This is like choosing a lawyer.
So is it a percentage of what money that we would receive? Let's say we got $1 million grant, federal government grant. Do you take a percentage of that?
Cannot.
You cannot. So you charge an hourly fee?
We agree generally on a fee that will cover all expenses, everything, and we just say, hey, you're going to send us a check for X number of dollars per month, and the agreement is you'll send us the check, and the other half of my agreement is I'm going to cash it. So, but no, I will.
Okay, so it's an independent contractor relationship.
That's right. And what I do want to say is I cannot, that will not be true with absolutely every federal program. But federal statutes that go back to the time of the Civil War prevent me not being an ordinary producer of the product, prohibits me from using power and influence, which is basically what I'm selling, access to people. It prohibits me from trading off of those relationships as a percentage, and there are federal statutes that prevent me from doing that. And that's the other thing I haven't really mentioned. I promise you, we will work very hard for you. I won't go to jail for you. So I'm not going to cross any lines at any time. You're never going to be embarrassed by what we do, everything. Now, understand, Washington is a tough game. I mean, we kill people just because you haven't killed anybody in a couple of weeks and you don't want to get out of practice. Yeah, it is a tough, vicious environment, but I'll never cross a line for you. So you're never going to be embarrassed of what we do. We don't. And so often this comes up in, I think, when you're dealing with members of Congress like your own member. Okay? Kevin has an interest, but what you need may be contrary to his political fortunes in the field. You know, we operate by going in and saying, Congressman, here's the proposition. This is what Foster City needs. This is why we have to have you, and we know this is adverse to your political future, so here's what we're going to do to help you get around it.
I got one more example, and I think Stefan kind of brought it. This is before Stefan was here too. We're completing a levee project because we were kind of leaned on FEMA for flood. So we built a $95 million levee. At the end, the reality was we were going to get funds from Congressman Spear, which we did. But Congressman Spear's money that we found out we couldn't take right away and use it for the levee, primarily because under federal law, at least that's what we understand, that the project couldn't have been started. So we're going to appropriate the money in another direction. But how can you get through that mission now? Stefan brought up a good example. We're looking at water quality issues out here in the lagoon and stuff like that. How would you handle what we did with the levee different, and how would you handle that with the lagoon situation? Because obviously we're talking waterways, we're talking congestion management, CEQA, and all that type of stuff. So how how are your skills going to be able to make sure that we apply for it properly?
Well, first of all, we have to be involved in the beginning. It's difficult, it's not that it's an impossibility, but if you've already, let's put it this way, the feds will not retroactively pay for a project that you've already undertaken and have paid for. So it's not like, this is a pretty good deal, and we could have applied, so can we do it retroactively? No.
Well, my question would have been simple. If you were aboard with us when we started the levy, would you think you've been able to get some money for us?
Well, that's an easy question.
I know you're going to say yes.
Yes.
How would have you approached it differently?
Oh, then I don't know about that. I mean, I thought yes was pretty good. The answer is, I don't know. Because then we'd have to look at the project, we'd have to look at the specifics of the federal program under which you might apply. We would look at what department, I mean, it could be, you're thinking about FEMA or EPA or someone, hey, could be USDA is interested in this, could be a Homeland Security. You just don't know until you really get into it. So the answer is, I don't have an answer.
Thank you. Did you ever think about being a comic? You're kind of funny. Thank you. Yeah, Sam?
David, you mentioned in your presentation that usually you kind of start to work for your clients in October, November, and line items have already been in there. So let's say you hire your firm, what is it? Are we too late for the party for this year, so to speak, as far as programs that we could apply for, if there's anything identified that would work for us?
No, there are two aspects to that. First of all, there's the congressional discretionary spending process. It used to be more regular, but Washington, that process kind of is like the seasons. So you go, but remember, maybe the best way I can explain it is the Congress absolutely must fund the government no later than 12:01 a.m. on October the 1st. Yeah, we haven't done it yet. So the answer is no. We are starting the process for earmarks for the coming fiscal year. We don't even know what the process is entirely. I do know some members in which we have an interest, Norma Torres being one, has already put out an indication that she expects the request to her office in the next couple weeks. We don't even know there's gonna be, sorry, we don't call them earmarks anymore. They are community funding initiatives or congressionally directed, whatever they are. Yeah, we have a new, but I still know them as earmarks. And I've been, like in Washington, the king of earmarks. I mean, I just loved them. Think about this, a couple of things about earmarks. First of all, oh, they run up the national debt. Crap, they do not. Here's the idea. Here's how the budget process works. Since 1926, the president must submit a budget to the Congress. And there's some formula doing that, like if there are 2 Mondays in February, has to do it the following Thursday by 3 o'clock. Never followed, but there is a formula going back to 26. We're always trying to control spending. And that's the precursor for what was originally the Bureau of the Budget, now the Office of Management and Budget. And the reason that is part of the Office of the Presidency, it's required by statute, has to be there. So they submit the request. Now the request goes since 1974 for the Budget Reconciliation Bill to the budget committees of both the House and the Senate. Sometimes they actually produce a budget. It's called a 302A allocation. It is the total amount of federal spending that can be allocated by the appropriations committees. And then the chair of the committee, remember I talked about how important the chair is? The chair allocates, right now there are 12, but there doesn't have to be, can any number of subcommittees, to each subcommittee called a 302B allocation, and that's the maximum amount of money that that subcommittee can spend. Now, let's say the committee has $100 in discretionary spending and you ask for $1. And Kevin, gets the earmark in, and he's got your dollar. Doesn't mean suddenly there are $101 that's being spent. There's 99 that goes to everybody else. And my theory always has been, when the government works best, that is closest to the people, why would not your elected representative have a stronger say in how your federal tax dollars are allocated, as opposed to a civil servant in Washington who has no idea where Foster City is? He thinks you're in Nebraska somewhere, if he's even looked it up that far. So, obviously, being very successful at earmarks, I'm really in favor of them, but the end of the story is they do not contribute to federal deficits. And the deficit is important, but to put the deficit in our spending, our debt is growing. We've spent these huge amounts of money. The debt is a problem, not by size so much, but by service. So the service matters a lot, but it's also a kind of a transfer payment inside America. I was educated as an economist, so I tend to wade too far into this. And I'm sure you all know that economists have accurately predicted the last 3 recessions 9 different times. So you always want to keep that in mind for economists. But what I like about the federal budget, and this is a true thing, if you kept Social Security, Medicare, and the Defense Department, and you got rid of every other aspect of the federal government, they're all gone. Everything is, you still have a deficit.
Yeah, Stefan.
Dave, just to kind of follow up, and Sam and I think Stacy also brought this up. Are we behind the 8 ball because we're talking to you now, the end of January, 1st of February, and you had mentioned November, councils are sitting down going through priorities. One of the things that I would suggest is we have a list, and as staff, we have an idea of where some of these future projects are and the things that we're working on. We've been talking about that. There's a transfer of information that will happen if we were to engage with the lobbyists in DC on these projects. There's a lot of staff input that's going to go there, reporting back to the city council. So it's not like we don't already know what those priorities are and what we are working on. We don't need to go back 4 months to come in, and that's been established. And as those things come up, those discussions are going to be happening. But I think it's fair to kind of talk about that process a little bit more. You mentioned about your suggestion, and I think it's more than a suggestion. It's, if this is to be effective, we need to come out to DC, and I've taken part of those. When do those visits generally happen? In my experience, it's in the springtime when the legislature is in session, Congress is in session. But talk to us a little bit about those visits and why they're important, if you don't mind.
Well, let's talk about specifics right now. I'm here because I want you to sign a contract with me. I know it comes as a surprise, but so, okay, I'm full of surprises. As I say, watch me pull a rabbit out of a hat without even the hat being there. Any event, long and short is, what we want to do is, we would make a commitment to you, even on the idea that you're interested, to get moving right now. Because time really is important to us. It is far more valuable for us to begin the process than to wait around to decide, yeah, you're really going to sign a contract, you're not going to. And what are we on? We're a moderately sized firm by Washington standards. We know what we're doing. We can make that commitment without any kind of commitment from you. Hey, it looks like we can get together on something. Let's just get started. Let's start doing it. Butler has not indicated what she might be doing for earmarks. Padilla's not put, Mullen is not put out any announcement that, I'm just saying some members, and Torres happened to be one because it was just flagged for me, says, hey, I want these, I don't know, 2 weeks or whatever it is. We'd want to get working on that right away. Here are your issues. We'll want, first of all, to take the things that you're after and decide the programs under which they might fall. And I know Attorney Stock asked me earlier about how it fits into this program and that program. Well, we want to see what the options are for you. And then we want to start negotiating with the members of what kind of interest do they already have. I mean, if your top priority is X or Y, and Mullen's top priority is exactly that issue for a different constituent city, well, one, can we divide it? The answer is no, he's really committed over here. Well, let's see what else he can do for us then. Let's see what the back bill is here. As I say, I hear no a lot. So, but we want to get started as quickly as we can. It isn't that you've missed, because we haven't even finished the 24 appropriations bill, and we are starting on the 25. Are there still bites at the apple for you in the 24? We don't know. Speaker Johnson is pretty opposed to having anything added to those bills, but you never know. We've not added stuff in that couldn't be done before. You don't, if you don't try, in other words, if you don't ask the question, you won't hear no. And if I hear no, how much worse off are you? And then we'll say, well, since we're bitterly disappointed in your lack of support for fiscal year 24, I know you're going to help me in 25. So this is what I need, and I need your commitment right now. So that's the answer to that. We want time really is important, because the clock works, and I can tell you the appropriations cycle in Washington, as important as this community is probably not going to wait for Foster City to decide on what you're going to do. So we just need to fit into their system, and then we'll see where they are. And since we haven't finished 24 appropriations, we don't know what we're going to do in terms of 25. Certainly you wouldn't be out in February, which is when we used to years ago, when we run a pretty defined cycle. You'd come out in February. Yeah, maybe March works, maybe April, could be as late as June or July. We don't know what the cycle is yet. And we have Washington's a funny place. We have an unknown commodity in the House. We don't know how Speaker Johnson is going to react to everything. I think one of the things, and I can't say this other than speculation at the moment, Johnson has done, I mean, at least Kevin had some idea of what he was doing when he stepped into the speakership. Johnson came out of nowhere. And now so what I believe is happening, and I've not talked to him, is my very good friend Tom Emmer. Emmer is, after Scalise, the next most powerful Republican. Tom will be Speaker someday. And he's a close friend. I think we are, if we're not the dominant, we may be the only lobbying firm in his district back home. If not, we're certainly the dominant. Let's say Tom and I historically have had a wonderful dinner once a year with no staff, just he and I. We have solved problems you can't imagine. I think as we got into the second bottle of wine one time, we were in the universe. But
You'll talk about wine with him at some point, and he'll tell you all about it, his private reserves or whatever it is.
I know red and white, that's about all I know.
Right.
But
Don't let it fool you.
But outside of that, back to the point, so we haven't finished 24 appropriations. Could be, we'll make some calls. Chance of that's pretty low. Not non-existent, but pretty low. But you want to be moving in 25. We want to be moving on that as rapidly as we can to make the initial calls. Hey, what are your timelines? What do you need? Here's what we need. Do you already have something in that category? What are your interests? And we'll just find that out.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. Any more questions?
Yeah, really quick, what's an agenda look like for a council trip or council member trip to DC? And what's your goal? What's the purpose of the trip?
To do two things, I think. First of all, because electeds want to hear from you as electeds. They're tired of me. I mean, I'll just say, I said that before, the meetings are vastly different. They're happy to see you. Yeah, they ain't happy to see me ever. the next thing that happens is we will have an agenda for you ahead of time that now you're probably not going to get it until you get off the airplane. Do you want to know how many times I've gotten burned? We need a draft. Okay, we send you out a draft, and somebody's got the darn thing and went to the wrong meeting at the wrong time because they still have this 2-week-old draft that we sent them, and it's stamped, don't follow this, but it doesn't matter. So we tend to keep, and Washington, as Elena's going to tell you, changes, I mean, in the morning, we are likely to have changes for that afternoon already. So it's really dynamic in terms of the meeting. We'll have a final schedule for you, and it'll be pretty intense. This has been referred to as the Death March already. You're there. We don't have you for very much time, and we want to work you. I mean, we'll work you like a rented mule. I'm just saying. We want to get as much out of you while you're there as we can. Now, for every meeting, we're going to talk to you in the hall before we go in. This stuff is, you've got this whole panoply of stuff you're going to do. This is why we're here. This is who we're talking to. These are his or her personal quirks, if you will. They do want to hear this. They don't want to hear that. Then we go into the meeting. It would be extremely rare for us to say anything. That's your show. So you're talking to whoever it is that we're talking to. And then as soon as we're back out in the hall afterward, what did you get out of the meeting? What do we think we got out of this? What do we have to do next? So this checklist. Now it's on to the next meeting, and the next meeting, and the next meeting. But they have the agenda ahead of time. At least 24 hours we'll have had a memo over to whatever office you're going to. This is who's going to be there. This is what we want to talk about, and this is the outcome that we want. And that makes it productive for you.
So from personal experience, let me just kind of add this. When we've done this, 1 to 2 council members would go. No more than 2. Obviously, we don't want to have any opportunity for a Brown Act violation. We don't go there. So 1 to 2 council members, and you're going to have a couple of staff members. Your city manager will be there, as well as one other, probably an assistant city manager as well, or whoever is working a lot of the legislative stuff and working on these programs. And it is back-to-back meetings. You fly in that evening, generally you'll have dinner with David or some of those representatives that night, get some sleep. Next morning we start early, and it's meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. You're there for a couple of days, and it's a marathon. You're jumping on the metro, what do they call it in DC? Metro to go across town or to the Department of Transportation, and you've got a meeting here with these folks, and you're over there, you're at Senator Feinstein's office or Congressperson Mullen or wherever it is. It's packed in for a couple of days, and then you get on the plane and fly home. You'll have a nice dinner in the evenings, generally with David or whoever is taking you out. You'll have a little bit of opportunity to, in the evenings, after you're exhausted, to maybe get in a little sightseeing if you want, but this is not a pleasure trip. This is really intense. And in the end, you come away having gained a lot more information, but more importantly, getting in front of these folks that are decision makers, talking about the things that are important, and they get to talk to you. And so you're not there alone just trying to talk about these issues. You have the staff members that have been working on these that'll be there with you. But if it's Jamie or whoever it is that we're with, they're going to do introductions because they know these folks, and then they're going to let us talk to them. They're going to let the discussion happen.
So is it generally project-based? I mean, you can't go there with just, you need to know who you're going to go talk to.
Usually when we go in, at least when I was with Imperial, yes, there are certain projects that we've already gotten in front of them that we've been talking about. And we're getting information from them. How's this going? What do you think? There's an exchange of information. But this is really an opportunity for our elected officials to tell them how important this stuff is to the community. This is your constituents, which oftentimes are their constituents. They really need this. The people that are voting for you that also vote for them, this is important to them for these reasons. And this is why you've come to Washington DC personally to visit with them, is to talk about something that you need to take back to your
Yes,
constituents.
John, I think you're right. We need to be specific about what, if we were looking for something for the lagoon or the water thing, that we should be prepared for that, not to make it worthwhile, then.
I'm guessing
They're not going to set up meetings that don't have a purpose. There are projects or things that are in the hopper, or stuff that we're working on or we're trying to get going. They're already going to know about it. We're going in there to talk with them about it. It's specific. Then you're on to the next meeting, which might be something completely different now with a different department.
Or trying to.
Maybe talking about COPS grants with one agency. And then the next meeting is over the Department of
Can we
Transportation.
take a break now? I think we've got, if anybody wants to catch up with some questions, we can. Why don't we take a 15-minute break?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
So much detail. I meant for what we need to decide. Yeah, well, for visualization.
I like knowing how it works, though.
Fellow few jokes. All right, I think we're going to kind of wrap up with David and see if any of the staff might have some questions of David.
You guys are involved in this as well, and we'll have some interaction if this is a course that we go, so feel free. Any thoughts or?
Won't be held against you. Just speak out. Seeing, is there any questions to staff or one more time? Okay, I think we'll move on. Thank you, David. We'll see you around the class.
Final closing remarks that you want to share, or nuggets of wisdom that you feel like?
We get a discount today or something, maybe 20% off your
You
fee.
decide by the end of the day.
Yeah.
Today and today only, $0.1 of a dollar, yeah, I got it. Thank you for listening.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right. Are you running the slides there, Kevin? You're gonna make me do that.